Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Let's talk about some more groups of bugs. Before that, if you can remember to like and subscribe, it helps me out quite a bit. Leave comments and questions, or some of you are experts in certain groups if you want to contribute information or clarifications. I'm not immune to mistakes, so feel free to point them out if it can be helpful. So today, I wanted to talk about the taxonomy and identification of a group called the Attelabids, which are right here. And the Attelabids are a type of, I guess you would say, false weevil. They are related to the weevils. They are in the Curculionoidea. So this is a superfamily that is under, obviously, the Coleoptera, because we're talking about beetles. And these are the Curculionids, which are the real beetles, and their relatives, their cousins, their allies. So the Curculionidae are here at the far end. And then all of these, I just say that they're the false weevils. They all look like weevils for the most part, but there are some morphological distinctions that you can use to tell them apart, and they are generally rarer groups for the most part, and partially just because there's so many actual true Curculionids. So for those of you who aren't familiar, so this would be a true weevil. They are usually defined by their rostrum, their snout. So this is their snout, called a rostrum. And the rostrum can be variable in length. Some weevils have just little snub rostrum, or they can have a really, really long one. And with the actual genus Curculio, the rostrum can be absolutely enormous. Like the ones that feed on acorns, their rostrum is bigger than their body. It's absolutely crazy. But they generally have these smaller, very ovoid bodies. If you know, the memes is snoots and boots, they usually have these kind of oversized feet, which is kind of funny. But they're generally pretty easy to identify. But one of the things that the true Curculionids all have in common, that for the most part the false Curculionids in the Curculionoidea don't, is that they have these geniculate antennae. And so geniculate, for those of you who aren't familiar, it means that the antennae are elbowed at these 90-degree angles. And they fit into these channels that are on the side of the rostrum, and they can kind of be slid back out of the way, which is kind of nice, and they can use that as protection. With these other kind of false weevils, they generally don't have that super well-defined geniculate antenna. Usually the antennae are more straight. Sometimes it'll be things like they won't have a club, which generally the weevils have clubs, or the rostrum will be real short, poorly developed, things like that. So there are ways to tell these other Curculionoid families apart. Today we're specifically interested in the Attelabids, which are the leaf-rolling weevils. These are all leaf rollers. And they very much look like regular Curculionids, except that they don't have those geniculate antennae, those elbowed antennae. So for the Curculionoidea, this whole group, this is such an enormous group. There's 200,000 plus identified species. Estimates for how many species there are, well over 1 million probably. There are, in the Curculionidae specifically, this one down here, there are at least 86,000 known species, and who knows how many individual species there are on the planet. It would be hundreds of thousands, if not approaching 1 million. But there's 68,000 or 86,000 species and something like 6,800 genera in the Curculionidae. In the Attelabids, this is a much, much smaller group. Globally, there are 2,500 species of Attelabids. So it's considerably fewer, 150 genera worldwide. In North America, it's much smaller. So this is North America, north of Mexico. There's only 51 species in 11 genera. So within North America, those 51 species, so this is for North America, north of Mexico. For the North American species, there are 3 subfamilies that are pretty easy to tell apart. The Attelabinae, the Rhynchitinae, which is, this is the largest group with 45 species and 8 genera. And then the Pterocolinae, which is very easy because there's only 1 species. How do you tell these guys apart? First, how do you tell them apart from the Curculionids, right? So the Attelabids tend to be fairly small. They tend to be between 2 and 15 millimeters in length. And they are leaf rollers, so they are generally associated with things like trees and shrubs, where they make their little nests. The prothorax is generally narrower, so let me get a good example. So here's a good example of an Attelabinae subfamily. So their prothorax here, tends to be considerably narrower than their abdomen and the rest of the thorax. Let's make this a little brighter. So it's very, very narrow prothorax, tend to be pretty small, between 2 and 15 millimeters. Their antennae are more or less straight with a loose club. They are frequently glabrous, so this one is pretty glabrous, meaning that glabrous means hairless, or they have very small erect or semi-erect setae. Their coloration is frequently bright and or metallic, so they are really good at having like this bright sheen to them, or being a little sparkly. There's a bunch of differences between the Attelabid mouthparts and the Curculeonid mouthparts, which I'm not really going to show you in this, but if you had a microscope and could zoom in on this mouth here, you would see that the labrum is fused, the maxillary palps are super rigid, the rostrum is variable, but it's generally fairly short. You're never going to see one as long as what you would see in like the curculios, where the rostrum is either the length of the body or more than the length of the body. Generally speaking, it's on the shorter side. And these are overall considered a pretty primitive weevil. The antennae, which are straight, are generally inserted at the base of the rostrum. So with these three subfamilies, we'll go through each of the subfamilies and talk about their defining characteristics. So first, there's the Attelabinae, which is what we were just talking about. So we have two here. We have the hazel leaf roller, which I believe is a European species, and then we have the oak leaf roller, which is an American species. With the Attelabinae, these are the true leaf rollers, and they build their larval nests in the rolled leaves of trees and bushes, and these are called a nidus, and this is what they look like. So sometimes the leaf will die, sometimes it won't, but the female clips and curls the leaves over and over themselves, and then deposits a larva in the middle, which develops by eating the leaves. So these are the true leaf rollers. The body for the Attelabinae are generally a little shorter, a little thicker. The rostrum tends to be shorter. You can't really see the rostrum here, but if we go to the rostrum on this one, it tends to be shorter, so less than the length of the head, and it has a very distinct shape. So if this is the head, the rostrum on the Attelabinae tends to go in, and then it flares out. So it has a narrowing and then a widening. Let's put the eyes there. So this is how the shape of the Attelabinae head usually is. And for those of you not familiar, at the end of the rostrum is the mouth. So on the Curculeonids, for instance, that has this really long, narrow rostrum, and then the mandibles are right there. So it's kind of ridiculous. The Curculeonids are a little ridiculous. Generally, the Attelabines are Attelabinae have pretty large, robust mandibles. Their inner margins do have teeth. Their front legs are generally enlarged compared to the other two sets of legs, and you can really see that on like this oak rolling weevil. The front femurs specifically, the front femurs are enlarged, and part of that is they need strong forelegs because they use it to kind of roll the leaves. Tarsal claws are generally fused at the base, and like I said before, they're generally glabrous. So this particular subfamily tends to be either hairless or have very, very small hairs. And you can kind of see that with how shiny they are. And with those characteristics, you should be able to identify the Attelabinae, compared to something like the Rhynchitinae, which are not true leaf rollers. There are 45 species in the US. This is a rose weevil, and this is one of the more better documented, or Attelabids, in that because they attack roses, they are considered something worth noting, as it were. There are 45 species and 8 genera in the US. The larvae don't live in the nidus like the Attelabine weevils do. These guys as larvae are generally leaf miners, or they'll live in dead leaves or inside fruit or inside flowers, things like that. So they're a little more variable, and they are more numerous within North America. Their body tends to be more elongate than the Attelabine or the Pterocolinae. So this is a rose weevil. This is another one. This one really shows it off. This is another Rhynchitinae. You can definitely tell that its body is considerably longer. It's less stout. than something like the oak rolling weevil. The body is more or less elongate. The rostrum tends to be much more narrow. And if you look at something like the rose weevil, you can really see it's a much longer, more narrow rostrum than the other group, than the Attelabinae group. The mandibles tend to be flat. Again, the teeth are on the inner and outer margins, not just the inner margins. The legs are largely subequal, meaning that they're roughly the same size and thickness. You don't have that enlarged femur on the front legs like you have in the Attelabines, like in this oak rolling weevil. And then the tarsal claws, you can't see this, but if you had a microscope, you could see it. The tarsal claws on the end of the feet are appendiculate, so they have little membranous appendages attached to them. And then finally, you have the Pterocolinae, which is super easy because there's only one species in the US and Canada, and it's this guy, the Pterocolus ovatus, the thief weevil. And the reason that they're called thief weevils is that they steal the nests of the Attelabine leaf rollers. So the Attelabines roll these niduses, then these guys steal it. So after they've either been abandoned or maybe they just raid it like a cuckoo, they will go in there and steal the nest. Immediately you will see that this guy is much more metallic. I said that a lot of these guys are metallic. This one is very metallic, this metallic blue-black, and that's kind of common for the subfamily. They are much shorter and squatter. They're almost oval, much more robust. They have a very short, stocky rostrum, and it's depressed and has parallel sides, so you don't get that thickening of it. The mandibles are flat. Generally, the mid and hind femora, the back legs, tend to be a little thicker than the front leg. You can see this front leg is fairly dainty compared to the other beetles that we've seen today. The tarsal claws will have teeth on them. And what's interesting, again, about this group is that they're unique to North and South America. So this particular subfamily won't be found anywhere else in the world, whereas the other two we were talking about are found in the Old World. And those are all the Attelabines in the US and Canada. If you look globally, there's some really weird Attelabidae. This is a giraffe weevil from Madagascar. They have these super long necks, and the male, this I believe is a female. The males have even longer necks, which they use in mating displays. And so you can see this is another giraffe weevil. This is not the same species. This one might be from India, maybe. Oh, these are old world species. You also have some just crazy ornamented, sculptured Attelabids. So you have this one that I found, old world species, I believe, and then another one where it's less protuberance and more bump, more wart. But they do tend to come in a kind of a red-orange color. A lot of the species are either red or orange with black mixed in. So super cool. Hopefully you enjoyed this group. I didn't actually know anything about this group until I don't know, 2017 or so, when I first saw one, and I was like, what is this? What kind of weevil is this? And then I realized it wasn't a weevil. I was dealing with something else because I was keying it out, and I was like, this is a weird bug. And it ended up being, I believe, one of these rose weevils and I'd never seen one before. So super cool. You will find them around, but generally you're going to have to like go into the trees in order to find them. But definitely worth collecting if you can find them. But you'll need a pretty good net that won't tear as you're banging around on the trees. So I'll talk to you guys later with another group of insects and see you around. Thanks for watching.